So I will call the meeting to order, and I need to make the Zoom statement. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternative means of public access pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. So is there anyone who is recording this meeting? The AdCom and the town are recording the meeting. Not hearing anyone. We will assume that there's only one official recording. And our second item on the agenda is comments from the public on matters not on the agenda. If there are any members of the public that want to offer a comment at this time, please use the raise your hand function and identify yourself by name and address, and we will listen carefully. And I'm not seeing anybody. So we will go to item 3 on the agenda. The police department request to repurpose a portion of FY21 capital funds. Welcome back, Chief Jones, and Dave Aline, I believe you've got the floor.
Okay, so this is just a request. Last year, there was some capital expenditures allocated to the police department that they have decided it doesn't make a lot of sense to use given the possibility of a new structure. So they want to repurpose some of that for improvements. And so take it away, Chief Jones.
All right, good evening, everyone. So just briefly, it's the capital was originally for the evidence room of the current station. And like Dave Aline said, in light of the possibility of a new station in the future, we don't think it's necessary to spend that on the existing building. So what we're looking to do is repurpose some of the capital, a portion of it, from that line item to some training equipment that is necessary for us, especially in light of COVID, where officers need individual training gear and equipment. So they're not, we're not relying on other agencies, which we normally do every year. We borrow from the Training Council, from like Plymouth Police Department and the other departments around the region to equipment to train our officers. So it consists of, you know, personal items like a face mask, neck protection, groin protection, gloves, things like that. So what we're looking to do, and the problem is this year is nobody is allowing their borrowed like we normally would. So we've been unable to train this year. So what we'd like to do is get our own sets of equipment and be able to use them, not only this year, but every year moving forward. This would be the gear for the individual officers would be issued to them. So there'd be no need to it would be part of their issued equipment, so that, you know, they'd be able to keep and maintain their own equipment instead of transferring it between officers. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
And this was already heard by the selectmen, Chief?
It was heard by Capital and the Board of Selectmen, correct?
And they have both approved these?
They have, yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments from members of the advisory committee?
Oh, Chief, is the equipment that you're buying, is that considered capital, or is it sort of, would that be like normal expense item in, you know, that you might see from year to year?
So it's a capital purchase. It would not be purchased from year to year. Once we have it, we'd be able to issue it to people, and it would be an expense that wouldn't come up. It would be part of like a new officer. If we hired a new officer to be issued that equipment, but it would be part of their original issue. The total is $25,904.90. So I think it would be a capital expenditure.
Other questions from members of the AdCom?
Libby's got one.
Libby?
Yeah, I just have a, Chief, I think you said this, but just for the, when you came to Capital, but just for the benefit of AdCom, I think we did ask if this was something eligible under CARES, because the reason you're adding this additional equipment is because you don't want your officers touching borrowed equipment from another force. And I believe you said that it was not eligible, but can you just mention that again for the benefit of AdCom?
Right, so it looks like it would not be eligible. We did run it by the procurement person that's handling the CARES Act reimbursement, and they do not believe it would be a reimbursable expense under CARES Act.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Libby. Other questions from members of the AdCom? Any questions from members of the public? Any further discussion? I guess I would entertain a motion to approve the request.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll come to vote. Now call your names as you appear on my screen.
So we're Bob, so just to be clear, so the vote is to repurpose $25,940 of capital to the purchase of this equipment, but that's the amount, 25,940.
Victor, it's 25,904.
904. All right, thank you.
905 almost total.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the request in that amount. It's been seconded. We need a roll call vote. Libby?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Eveline?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Kristen? Nancy?
Aye.
Andy? Andy, you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Aye. Sorry.
Thank you. David? Dave?
Aye. Aye.
Victor?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Evan?
Oh.
Tina?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Brenda?
Aye.
And I think I got everybody, and I think that's 14-0 in favor. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
Now we come to our budget hearings, and I hope all of you saw my email this afternoon that we're not going to be able to hear Public Works, landfill, recycling, or sewer because Randy Sylvester has been flat out with storm duties, and he asked us to defer those hearings. So we will hear them on Thursday night. So the good news is we'll have a shorter meeting tonight. And longer, bad news is we'll have a longer meeting Thursday. So we come to the Bathing Beach Trustees, and that's under your chair, Andy. Who's doing?
That's me.
Okay, Dave.
Hi,
And
everybody.
welcome, Alan, and the rest of the trustees.
Yeah, I see. I just, by way of introduction, for those who don't know, Alan Peralt's joining us tonight, who is the chair of the Bathing Beach Trustees. I don't see Ed Johnson on my screen. Alan, is he with us or no?
He is. He's not visually, but he's there.
Oh, good.
Ed, you
Okay.
could unmute, and Chris Daly is also here.
Oh, good. So Ed and Chris, who make up the Bathing Beach Trustees as well. So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us. If you guys would turn to page 296 in your budget books, that's the Bathing Beach Trustees budget. I'll just provide a quick introduction, and then I'll let Alan and Ed and Chris add whatever they'd like to. Certainly they can speak a little bit to the fabulous new Snack Shack, which is, for those who've tried it out, had a soft opening this last fall. But hopefully hits the ground running in a post-COVID environment this summer. So just looking quickly at the budget, as you can see, it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge budget. The largest chunk of the budget is related to the wages part-time line item, which is the seasonal lifeguards. I think just this last year, and Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, just this last year, the rec department ultimately took over managing the lifeguard scheduling and so forth, because they had experience with that at South Shore Country Club pool. And I think my understanding is that went well. And in talking with Mark Thorell, who also happens to be one of my budget connections, that is going to continue into this future year as well. So the balance of the changes in the budget, as you can see, are utility related. And forgive me, I actually didn't just talk about that with Alan, but that may be connected with the bathhouse itself. So with that, Alan, if you wanted just to give an overview of your highlights or what you see, and maybe a quick summary of the bathhouse and your understanding of your relationship with Mr. Acera there and how that's going to look going forward.
Okay, thanks, Dave, and good evening, everyone. Some familiar faces. We haven't been before you other than budget for a few years, but I see our former chairperson, Lucy Hancock's on the call too. I'm going to have Ed unmute himself because Ed made the presentation to the selectmen. I'll just give you a little bit of an overview of our relationship with the snack stand vendor. It's Greg Acera of Eat Well, Tosca, Stars. And he did have, as Dave pointed out, a soft opening this past year. Went very well. In some ways, it worked to our town's advantage because year one, he paid no rent. So we had an abbreviated year, but it counts as a year. So as of this year, for the next 5 years, he pays $12,500 annually, and that's spread out over a 6-month period, kind of what he anticipates his season to be. So that will be a revenue source for us going forward. And then we are hoping at some point in time, not post-COVID, to be getting some revenue out of the community room, because that was one of the criteria when we got the $350,000 from town meeting in 2017, is that money would be repaid to the town. So we see the main source of that in the future being the snack stand, which also has a percentage rent portion and rental of the community room. With that, I guess I'll let Ed, and then Chris can jump in too, but Ed explain the breakdown of our $38,000 budget.
Thanks, Alan. As you can see, most of our cost is salaries. We're requesting $26,834 on salaries, and that includes a beach supervisor, a head lifeguard, and 2 just regular lifeguards. So that's the vast majority of our budget. The other line items are building and grounds. We're increasing that because originally it was only $1,400, but we asked $9,000 with the selectmen. It was reduced to $6,000. So we need that for extra costs of maintaining the property. Right now, we're maintaining 2 buildings. The utilities, we request $1,500 in utilities. Some of these are unknown because the building wasn't open during the summertime for the most part, just at the end of summertime. So some of these will be increased costs, but again, they're unknown. The water utilities, as you know, we plan on putting on a shower outside. So that's going to increase the water usage. And it's going to have a shut off that will only be running for a short period of time, and then it will turn off by itself. The consolidated supplies is essentially toilet paper, items like that, cleaning supplies. The uniform allowance is for the lifeguards, for the sweatshirts, for the bathing suits, for the t-shirts, and for the hats. So essentially, that's all we're requesting, being one of the smallest budgets in the town. I don't know if anybody has any questions on any item.
I have two questions. One is maybe Alan or Sue, you can answer this, or Ed. The revenues will go into the general fund.
Good question, Bob. We haven't, it's the first time, so I think that's probably what we would do. We haven't set it up, and I think Ed and I were talking about this earlier today. We have never set up a formal process for repaying the town for the $350,000. So I think that is also a thing we should talk with Sue and the selectmen and maybe a rep of advisory of what are the mechanics of that, if you would. But that's our assumption, Bob, because we don't have any way of everything goes through Sue's department. All of our payrolls and everything come out of accounting. So we don't have personnel to manage that.
And Sue, is that your understanding that it would go into the general fund?
So far, yes.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything different.
And the second question I had was with respect to the utilities and to whether the operator of the restaurant should be made responsible for those.
Good question. Right now, he is. We didn't divide. It would have been fairly costly, Bob, when we were building this to separate the utilities from the community room from the snack stand. Because obviously a snack stand with, freezers and whatever. So essentially he does pay those. Most of the utilities you're seeing there are for the utilities we have for the old building, which we didn't open last year, so they were very low. And somewhat of our share of reimbursing him based on the use of the community room, which right now, as Ed said, is a variable. We don't really know. We'll have a better idea post-COVID how that's going to work out. This is kind of a learning year. But right now, until now, Mr. Acera has been paying the utility bills.
Okay. Those are all the questions I had. Anyone else from the AdCom?
Bob, can I just clarify one thing on that?
Sure.
So does that mean then that, so if the utilities that we see here are for the other building, then does that mean that that Mr. Acera is getting the bills directly himself and paying those for the bathhouse?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we may have to work out something. Again, we've had no usage of the community room, Libby, at all. So
Right.
we may have to come up with some pro rata share, but I'm thinking it's going to be de minimis. It might be like 10% of the utility bill, because clearly he's got the things that draw power, and he's responsible for maintaining the restrooms, by the way. So even the cost of those. And so when we have our restroom budget, now it's for the old building.
So then if revenue comes into the community room, if there's an event there, does the rent for that room go directly to the town?
That would be our intent, and we still haven't worked that out. We're talking with the selectmen about going through an RFP process for having a designated caterer, if you will. So there would be certain functions in there that would be like the rec department or the town departments using where there'd be no revenue, like probably days, but like weekends. And it's going to be a facility that could probably handle 25 to 30 people for small functions. So we think it's going to be fairly desirable, but we have to work the mechanics out on that. But I think similar to Bob's question about where does the revenue go from that, we'd have to work out something with Sue and the selectmen of like, how do we process this? This is kind of a new thing for us. We've never had revenue.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from members of the AdCom?
So going back to the grounds, so the amounts jumped around. Like in 19, the actual expended was 17,000, fell down last year, which was, of course, at least the beginning or the end of that last year was the COVID year, to about 1,500. And now you're up to 6,000. You said that's for the additional building, but is the additional building, I mean, it's new, right? And what is the breakdown between what the town is responsible for maintaining the new building and what the restaurant operator is?
Good question. I mean, basically the exterior of the building is our responsibility, and very good point. The building was made of low maintenance materials. You know, it's red cedar shingles, it's E-Pay decking, it's ASEC trim, it's a new roof. So I see some of those, Victor, going towards the old building, which was not even open last year. So we haven't even opened or turned the water on. The bathrooms in particular were in rough shape. When we barely got through the year, I saw Susan Sarney had been on it, or she is. We almost had to use porta-johns because of the difficulty. So this is going to be an unusual year. I think it was higher in the past too, because we had the goose control under our budget, Victor.
Okay.
And that slid over to DPW. So that's largely why there was such a variation from the past to now. And I think we just want a cushion of some sort because we're tight on landscaping. We barely brought this project in on budget. I mean, like to the penny. So we will have some things. We still have some tree planting and we're hoping we can get through DPW. So we'll have a need for probably all of that money in one way or another, you know, to keep us whole. It shouldn't be that large a number in the future, though.
Okay. I had forgotten about the goose program.
Yeah.
That was changed, yeah.
Other questions from members of the AdCom?
This is Andy, Bob.
Yep.
Is there a lease agreement between the town and the Sarnies?
Yeah, and Greg Acera?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
Yes, there is. It's it's a 10-year lease with 2 10-year options. And it's also worth noting, we negotiated a percentage rent. So we get 6% of anything over 250,000 in gross revenue in a year. And I suspect that will turn out to be some money because I think he was doing almost $4,000 a weekend in the late fall with no advertising. So I think that will hopefully be another source of revenue.
Okay.
But yeah, we negotiated that. Susan Murphy was our liaison. So yeah, that was a lengthy process, but that's pretty well tied down.
And who has a copy of that? Tom Mayo?
Tom Mayo has it. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions and comments from members of the AdCom? I don't see any. Any questions or comments from any member of the public? I don't see any there either. Dave, do you have a recommendation?
I do. Congratulations again, guys, on the bathhouse. That's fabulous. I would recommend for wages a total of $26,832. For expenses, $11,450 for a grand total of $38,282.
Thank you, Alan, Chris, and Ed. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And our next budget hearing is on health. And is that you, Nancy?
That's me, actually.
Oh, that's Brenda. Okay.
So I'd like to introduce Susan Sarney, who just came on visually, our Executive Health Officer here in town. The Health Department budget you'll find on page 216. So Susan, if you would, just fill people in a little bit on the functions of the Health Department and specifically on how COVID has impacted your work this year.
Typically, we do many different kinds of permits. We do septic systems, private wells, building permits, hoarding, social work. We do food establishment permits, camps, foodborne illness, nuisance complaints, tobacco enforcement, hazardous material is typical throughout the year. We have different permitting processes with food and wastewater treatment plants, fats, oils, and grease for the sewers, tobacco, rubbish, mobile food permits, pool permits, daycare, and things like that. And then this year we just did COVID. All aspects of COVID. So I don't know if I need to go into more detail.
You had a busy year.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you didn't know Susan before and know her voice before, you've heard it on some of the robocalls from the town to sort of help people stay up to date with what's going on with COVID here. So anyway, so thank you, Susan, for all of that. So the budget that is on your page 216 is basically both level services as well as pretty much level funded. The salaries are 343, 542, which is a 0.2% increase from previous year, $973 total. Those are step increases. And in terms of expenses, the amount requested is $19,862, which is basically, again, a 0.2% increase from last year. Actually, no change in terms of expenses, but the total budget altogether is an increase of 0.2%. If you are wondering sort of whether the costs of all of the COVID work here in town are increasing the health department budget, the answer is no, because the health department has gotten probably, Susan thinks, about $35,000 in reimbursable monies or grants, I think, for doing extra PPE purchases as well as contact tracing work. And the same will be true for setting up the vaccination clinics and staffing and equipment needed for that. So that will be DPH money coming to the town for that. Questions?
Any questions or comments from?
I think Evan was trying to talk, but he was all muted. My dog.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yes, there you are.
I just did all the stuff that you normally do. You got to do all the COVID stuff. So here's a long list.
Evan, you're breaking up.
Wait, is that better?
Yes.
That is better.
Okay. Well, there we go. It's a quick question. Who did the stuff that you normally do while you were chasing all this COVID stuff?
One person, my health agent.
Okay.
I'm still trying to give a couple. I'm the only one that can approve septic systems. The Board of Health approves all new construction. I still have to do all the repair. So I try to at least do 1 or 2 hours of repairs because we've seen an increase due to everyone being at home. We've had several septic failures. 65% of the town's on septic, 35 is sewer.
Thank you.
And if you're wondering what a sanitarian is, that's actually the salary for the health agent, Betty Nee, who's been covering all of the usual health department stuff while Susan's been our COVID person.
Other questions or comments from the AdCom?
Susan, how has the social worker been working, this year? And what's been the ability of other departments to use the social worker? I mean, has she worked with public safety at all, or how has that been set up?
She's 20 hours a week. She does work for the veterans department a lot, and she does a lot with elder services. We also work with the fire department several times throughout the year on any hoarding cases or condemnations. She's working out quite well. I believe 20 hours is perfect for that role at this time.
Other questions or comments from members of the AdCom? I don't see any. I think all of us would like to express our appreciation for everything you have done this year, Susan. It's been an incredible challenge for your department. And, our hats are obviously off to you. Nobody's got one on.
Thank you.
I took mine off.
Any questions or comments from members of the public?
Hey, Bob, can I just ask a quick question of Susan?
Yes.
Susan, so we had a request from the police chief for a social worker. Do you foresee any possibility for your social worker to assist the police in their functions?
She could. I mean, it's a town social worker. I don't know the need. I know that there was a woman there that was helping out on Fridays. And we could see if Cheryl could, assist them at this time too.
Yeah, apparently the position they had was a shared one that was provided under a grant.
Mhm.
And that grant has expired. So
Yeah.
the chief felt it was worthwhile to try to add a person to his staff. And seems to feel that someone who's trained to work with police would be especially valuable from their standpoint. And I simply raised the question of, whether your person might have availability or would be willing to help out or able to help out in some capacity.
I'm not sure how many hours she would have to dedicate to that. I would also be concerned on her safety. She doesn't really work with police, but
Right.
I think, over the phone, her role is more giving residents any housing or food or creating links. She's not a private social worker, so she does those with instability in their homes and things like that. Aileen was the police woman working under the grant. We met her and we kind of worked with her as she was more for police.
Right.
But if Cheryl has some extra time, an hour or so here and there, she could help out police, but I don't know how much, if he needs somebody dedicated, more educated on police enforcement and safety, perhaps.
And that's what he was saying also. And it sounds like you're agreeing with his assessment of what the position would be. All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the AdCom? Members of the public? I don't see any. So Brenda, do you have a recommendation?
I do. Recommend sum of $343,542 for salaries for the health department. Expenses of $19,862 for a total budget of $363,404.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
That brings us to the library budget.
That is I.
Welcome, David. Welcome, Linda, and other trustees. And Andy, you're taking this one?
Yes, I am.
I'm sorry, Brenda, can I ask one question? The health imperatives budget, and I don't know if there was another little one. Are those going to be done separately?
Yes, the selectmen did those separately.
Okay.
I think I have them tentatively on the list for February 9th.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I want to welcome Linda Harper, who is the executive director of our library, Lucy Hancock, who is the chair of the Board of Trustees, David Mahegan, who is the former chair and currently the vice chair, and Jeremy Parker, who is the chief financial officer and treasurer. The library's budget begins on page 258. I thought we would do this in about 3 steps. I'm just going to talk very briefly in terms of an overview. Then I'm going to of the library structure. Then I'm going to ask Linda to tell us what the library has been doing over the past year, and she has some slides that will help you follow that. And then we'll go back to page 258, which is the actual budget, go through that quickly, and then answer any questions if that's okay, Mr. Chairman. The Hingham Public Library was actually incorporated by the state legislature in 1872. And at that time, a board of trustees it was established to be run by a board of trustees who are and is still run by a board of trustees. There are 3 ex officio officers, which include the chair of the Board of Selectmen, the superintendent of schools, and the town treasurer. And then there is 2 appointed by the moderator and 3 by the selectmen, if I'm not mistaken. So you have a board, Linda, of how many? About 15, is it? You have to unmute, please. Thank you.
Yes, it's about that. I'd have to do a head count, but approximately that.
Okay. Now, the trustees hire the director. The director in turn hires the currently 12 full-time employees, 23 part-time employees, and they also oversee 100 plus volunteers. The library works with the state through the Massachusetts Board of, Massachusetts Board of the Library Commissioners.
Correct.
And that board certifies libraries in the different municipal libraries and provides some funding. Back to the trustees for a minute. The trustees have some sources of revenue. Obviously, the primary source is the town appropriation, but they do have an endowment, and they use some funds from the endowment each year. Plus, they have an annual fundraising campaign. Plus, they collect some small revenues from the library itself, from book sales, used book sales, fines, vending machines, commissions on the art show sales. With those funds, the trustees pay for all of the programs put on by the library, and then contribute a substantial amount to the purchase of books and periodicals. The books and periodicals expenses, as you might expect, go up annually, and for the longest time, the trustees were covering that item entirely, but in 2017, it became apparent that it was unsustainable, because again, their primary source of revenue is, other than the town, of course, is the earnings from the endowment and the fundraising campaign. So in 2017, it was agreed with the town that the trustees would fix their annual contribution to the books and periodicals at $210,000 a year, which they do pay, and plus the additional roughly $20,000 a year for the library to operate the programs. So in addition to that, roughly $230,000, the library gets approximately $33,000 additional funds each year from state aid. The library, to get that, has to be certified by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners and meet some other conditions, which it consistently does do. And the certification also permits it to be a member of the Old Colony Library Network and the loaning from other libraries in the area. That's part one. Before we get to part three, the numbers, I would ask Linda to talk about the library's operations in light of the fact that the library had to close in March of 2020. So Linda, if you would tell us how the library has operated since in 2020, especially after March, and in the current year as well.
Sure. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. Absolutely. As you all know, and for those of you who had heard my presentation before, we keep track of a large number of statistics every year about usage. It helps us to gauge, what we need to do for the library, what people are using, where to contribute our resources. This year is a little different because we have our traditional metrics that we use, which are on page 267 of your budget book. That's our presentation slide. And basically, these are traditional statistics we use to measure how well and how often people use the library. These are amazing numbers. Right now, these really cover through March, when the world changed and we closed due to COVID. When that happened, up till that time, so up through March, if you look at them, some of the statistics, we had 165,000 people who came through our doors. We loaned 288 books, ebooks, movies, magazines, sent over 43,000 items between libraries for our interlibrary loan. We had 13,892 adults, teens, and children attend 774 library programs and events, and that's only through March, mind you. Over 11,000 people, Hingham residents, had active library cards. People came into the building, oftentimes with their own computers to work at home. They connect to our Wi-Fi. We had over 108,000 connections to our Wi-Fi up through March alone. And we had over 3,000 reference and research questions answered. These are a lot of the things traditional libraries do for patrons of all ages. You know, part of our service is to help, you know, youngsters with early childhood literacy. We help the teens with their school projects. We help adults by providing them space to work from home, research assistance, quiet place to go and meet friends, and, you know, recreational material to read or for lifelong learning. So those are traditional things. And then COVID came, and libraries across the country were suddenly thrown into a whole new world where we had to figure out how to still achieve our mission and provide services in a safe way in a dangerous environment. So if you look at page 269, what we had to do is adjust and figure out how we can get people physical materials in a safe way, how we can connect them with lifelong learning opportunities, and how we can basically provide services in a much different way than libraries have done for hundreds of years. And we had to do it in a very short order. I have to say, I would be remiss if I did not give the hugest shout out to each and every one of my staff members for going above and beyond the call of duty. I cannot say how creative everybody has been, how everyone has jumped to do whatever it takes to make this happen and has worked way outside of job grade. We are doing anything and everything to make this work, and it's been phenomenal. So on page 269, some of the things we've seen since March. So suddenly people were going to online because, especially in the beginning, we closed down and we weren't sure if it was safe to even loan books anymore, which we do now. We have to quarantine the materials to make sure COVID virus isn't still existing on it. But some of the things we've seen that really made dramatic changes were our ebook usage, which increased 32.68%. Now they're just through June. So this is fiscal 20 numbers. So this doesn't cover after June, which is increasing even more. E-audio collections, so those are your audio books you get online, your movies and music, increased 42.58%. And this is just one fiscal year and even half of a year. And network electronic collections, our databases, increased over 100%, 100.93% in one fiscal year. So it showed us that people needed the library, and when they couldn't come into the physical building, they were meeting us online. They were getting their materials online. The one thing we weren't offering at that point was, you know, access to physical books, but also our programs, which, as you know, if you've been to the library, are hugely popular. So we went to an online forum. We found out how to learn, like we're doing now with Zoom, how to go onto YouTube and offer classes. And we took advantage of every skill every staff member had, from cooking to crafts to offering to do story times. And we put on, as you see on here, just through October of 2020, which is when I made these slides, we showed that from March through October, 3,528 people virtually attended or viewed 391 online programs. Some of the things we offered were author talks, lectures, book groups, story times, family events, technology classes, Zoom tutorials every week, as well as Libby tutorials every week to teach people how to download their audiobooks, arts, craft, cooking classes, programs. We basically did as much as we could, and people were starved for a connection to their community and to each other. I was very grateful that we were able and still continue to provide that. Since then, to give you an idea, 2 additional stats since these slides were made. From March through December, we've now offered a total, and we've never done the digital programming before, a total of 475 digital online programs with 4,743 people who've attended or viewed them. And that's not last month, that's just through the end of December. And then additionally, I looked at just the first quarter of fiscal 21. So that's outside of this. You'll hear all about this next year, but just for the first quarter of this year, of this fiscal year, we've so far offered 184 digital programs and had 1,768 people attending or viewing. So even though our physical building is still closed, Until then, people are still using the library like crazy. They're using our online services, they're attending digital programs. And as many of you know, we're also offering contactless holds pickups. You can still get your physical books. We make sure it's safe. They're quarantined. And then what happens is people put things on hold. We get them ready. We check them out. And then we put them in bags with their names on them out in the outer vestibule. So they can just come in, find the bag with their name on it, pick it up and leave. No contact, completely safe. That is a hugely popular service as well. Some of the things that, we've noticed from this is that cost of ebooks. We have been increasing our ebook collection like crazy because of the demand increasing. And just one thing to be aware of, an ebook is a lot more expensive than a physical book. An ebook isn't actually owned by us, it's licensed for so many uses usually. We don't own it forever, but because it's used by so many people, the publishers charge us a lot more money. So we can get a hardcover book, say for $26, $30, somewhere in that range. It might cost us 3-4 times as much to get the same ebook, and then we don't own it forever. So that is one consideration to the switch to an online model. There are some economic implications to that. The other thing I want to mention is besides quarantining materials, I also want to just give a quick note to the custodians we have in the building. While the building's closed to the public, staff are still coming in and working. We're social distancing, keeping everyone safe, but our custodians are doing a phenomenal job. We're touching a lot of materials, using a lot of book carts. They're wiping everything down in between. They're cleaning the restrooms frequently. All of our workspaces are being wiped down between uses. So everybody in the building is working very carefully to keep everybody else safe and very hard to make sure we can continue library services uninterrupted. And the model we have now is sustainable even as COVID outbreaks happen. Some libraries have tried to scale back and open up, and they close down and they start something and they have to stop something. One of the things I'm very proud of is that, it's not what we all want. We all want things to be back to normal, but until then, we can offer our services pretty much uninterrupted. We have a good model going and it seems to be very successful. And when we talk to our patrons, they are really, really grateful. We hear good things every day. So I'm happy to report that. The next thing I would mention is on page 270 of your book. You'll see kind of an overview of our budget and what we're looking at for this coming year. As you know, it's a level services budget. We have staff and expenses, salaries of $1,559,866, which are 12 full-time, 23 part-time. Our expenses are $369,200. Some of the major items being obviously the repair and maintenance, because as we all have heard, the building's aging and needs some extra repairs. Our utilities, which as you probably have heard from other departments, the rates have increased and accounted for some extra charges in there. Books and materials, which as Andy has explained, does increase a little bit every year because of our need to meet state requirements. And OCLN network assessment, which is the fee we pay to be part of this consortium of almost 30 libraries. It gives us some amazing access to a great number of materials. And Andy, and anything?
Just, I noticed on your website today that there is a survey that you're asking everybody who goes to your website, hopefully everybody who's a member, to complete. And what are you going to do with that information?
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that. I had a note to bring that up. I'm glad that you brought it up for me. Yes, and actually on page 268 of your budget book, that ties right into the first key initiative that we have, which is the development of a new long-range strategic plan to guide our goals and activities for the next 5 years, fiscal 23 through 26, using data collected through community surveys and meetings. So this is our first step to helping collect data from the community to make a 5-year long-range plan. We make that, we file it with the state. It enables us to apply for grants. It's a great opportunity that also helps us to figure out what people like, what people don't like, what's meeting their needs, what needs to change. We did this in 2015 for our last 5-year plan and found out some wonderful things. We had over 1,600 people respond to that last survey. We also had a satisfaction rate that was very high. We were very pleased with, but we also learned a lot of things that people would like to see changed about the library. We're using that same survey, if you all remember 10 minutes to a better library survey, we've made some adjustments to it. We've added new questions that cover the new realities with COVID. So we'll have some good benchmark data as well. So it's a good internal use as well as external use. And we will be having in the spring community meetings to kind of figure out, hear from people in the community, what we can do to make the library even better, even though it's pretty great already, I think. So thank you everyone here. If you haven't taken the survey, I highly encourage you, please take it. Tell us what you think. Tell all your friends and family to take it. We want to get a great response rate. So anything you can do to spread the word would be greatly appreciated. And I see Lucy smiling at that. So that would be really great. And then, the other thing as our key initiative is just to continue to evaluate and adapt these services. Now that things have changed so greatly in libraries because of COVID-19, libraries across the nation now figure out what now, what have we done differently that's so good it should probably stay. What of our traditional services do we need to change? What do we bring back? So I think you'll see a lot of changes in public libraries across the nation as we figure out, do people like this pickup model where they can just, run in and pick up a book or get curbside for the library that offers it? Do people want digital programs? And if it's 7 o'clock on a cold winter night, they don't want to come out, but they want to go to a live author talk. So these are all the things that, will possibly have budget implications as we go forward and figure out, what's more costly. Do we need more people? Do we need less people? Do we need different, furniture? People are going to use the library differently. So we have a lot to figure out. This is a momentous change, I think, that you're seeing in libraries and will continue forward. And I've heard it said that what's happening now in public libraries is what would probably happen in the next 15 years. It just happened in 3 to 6 months time instead. So we've all been thrown into a sea change, and now we figure out where to go from here. The survey is a great starting point to hear what everybody thinks about where we are and where we should go.
Thank you, Linda. You didn't mention that third key initiative. My understanding is that you're negotiating with David Mahegan's agent to have him do a program on writing, if we can get his fee down to a manageable number.
Well, if we offer an online program, we could probably have an unlimited number. So I think that's a prime candidate for that.
Let me direct your attention to page 258 of your budget books, please, which is the budget. The salaries, as Linda said, this is a level services budget. The salary requested is $1,559,866, which is an $8,779 increase from fiscal 21 budget, or a 0.5% increase. Let's see, the expenses total $369,200, which is a $22,936 increase over fiscal 21, or a 6.6% increase. Now, Linda was kind enough to spend a lot of time with me explaining the items in the budget that had either a significant increase or a decrease. And the first one, of course, you come to is the utilities electric, which is roughly $16,000 higher than the budget last year. This really relates to demand charges and probably some understated budget numbers in the past. The demand charges we've heard about before, which of course is the highest 15 minutes of usage in the past, what period of time is that?
30 days.
Each day?
30 days, 15 minutes from the past 30 days.
30 days, correct. And that is charged at the premium rate. Actually, the library used to pay electric utilities in amounts closer to 90 to 100,000. And so it's not, if you went back several years before 2019, you would see those numbers up in the 90,000 range. The next utilities number, which is the natural gas, is down $7,000 roughly. Some new and more efficient boilers have been installed in the library, which accounts for most of that, I believe. The third significant item that I saw was, of course, the books and periodicals, which is up approximately $9,000 from last year. And as you can see, that goes up roughly $9,000 to $10,000 per year. We have some obligations to the state as to the minimum amounts that the library must expend for books and periodicals to remain certified by the state and be able to participate in the library network and in the receiving the state aid. Those numbers are very carefully monitored by Linda and her business manager. The next significant item is actually the next item you see is $12,000 for meetings and seminars, which is the same as it was last year, up significantly from the fiscal 20 actual expended. The $12,000 is the amount required pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement. So there's no discretion in that. The advertising services of $500, the same as last year, but nothing expended in fiscal 20. So I asked Linda what that was about. I told her, I said, do you put out an ad that says, please come to our library? And she said, no. But what happens is if we have to hire someone, as they recently needed to hire another custodian, in order to put an ad in the newspaper, that's what that charge is for. You can post the opening online, and you can post it on a bulletin board at town hall, but not everybody goes to town hall or looks at the library online job openings. So that explains that. And let's see, I don't think there was anything else of significance. So that expenses, as I said, total $369,200, a 6.6% increase. The rest of the items are, if you go over to the next page, you'll see that the capital outlay numbers are included in the total for the library. So it's $2,004,851 is the revised budget number for 21. But that, as I say, that includes the capital outlay. If you deduct the capital outlay, fiscal 21's number is $1,897,351 for just salaries and expenses. This year, the request is $1,929,066, which is a $31,750 increase, or 1.7%. And with that, I offer the floor to anyone who has a question.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Linda. Welcome back, Lucy. Good to see you on the third floor again. And any questions or comments from members of the AdCom?
Yes, Brenda.
I'm just curious how the technology borrowing was going before COVID and whether it's continuing with COVID.
That's a great question. It actually is continuing. We stopped for a little while because we weren't sure of the materials. We've been, watching all the studies on the virus and how long it lives, and the studies have basically been book-based, but they started expanding after March into other library materials that are loaned. So we felt safe to start loaning them. With our pickup system, we weren't sure how that would work, but it's actually working. The only difficulty is the return, because you can't put like a projector in the book drop. So we ask people to give us a call, let them know when they're coming in, and we'll ask them just to leave it in the vestibule and give us an idea when they'll be there, and then we go out and get it. So there's, you know, it's a great area. So we haven't had any problems with theft or misuse. People are still using the items, particularly, you know, like the e-readers and the laptops are huge right now. Hotspots, we also want hotspots, which is big because it gives people the ability to get internet in places where they don't have it. And then all the fun stuff is also circulating. I think the more essential items are circulating higher than, you know, the things that otherwise people would just try because it's fun to have. You know, like we have a mixing bowl. I don't think a lot of people have been taking that out, although they've been doing a lot of baking. So a little hit or miss on some of the items, but thank you for asking. Yeah, the technology in particular to connect to the internet has been a big help right now to have.
Well, it's certainly a great program because it means that every family doesn't need to buy a piece of equipment that they use once or twice a year and then eventually ends up at the transfer station as waste. So all of it really good to have it be multiple use. So.
Good. Thank you, Brenda.
And whenever books or any other loaned items are returned, they're quarantined for 3 to 5 days and then cleaned before they are recirculated, correct?
Yes, everything is, we give the quarantine period for it, so we don't actually have to wipe it down with disinfectant because the amount of time it's sitting untouched, if there is any virus residue, it is no longer alive by the time we pick it up and touch it again.
Thank you.
Other questions or Julie?
Hi, a quick question about when the renovation and expansion project did not go forward a couple years ago, unfortunately. I wondered what your planning is in terms of, you know, you're doing this next steps, you're doing the survey. Are only the user surveys helping you decide what you're going to do next, or you already have plans like, you know, the parking lot is just too tough to deal with. We're going to go ahead and put that in our plan no matter what anyone says, or what's your thinking about the next steps on any of those pieces?
Yes, that's a great question. And some of this goes into capital. So since you mentioned parking lot, I'll start off there just really quickly. We have in our capital this year a parking lot feasibility study. It looks like we will ask that to be encumbered because with no cars in our parking lot, we really can't do a feasibility study. So that one might have to get, that can has to be kicked down the road, as they say. So that is, and that's been a perennial problem. We know once we reopen that won't go away. That's been like that for years. So that's something we do have to address. So that would be the parking lot and the walkway. We want to have a feasibility study. And then depending on what they find, we'll come up with a plan and then put that in the capital budget a couple years out. We actually pushed everything out that we had planned for another year or two, just because now we have a COVID delay and we're not sure when everything will start returning to normal. As for the building itself, a lot of applying for the grant last time and moving to that was a result of those patron surveys. We heard over and over the things that the library didn't have that was related to the physical structure and the physical layout that people wanted to change. And that's one of the eye-opening things to the deficiencies of the building and how it isn't serving members of the community in ways that they want. So that's what led us to, you know, apply for the grant in the first place and put those plans together based on what people said they wanted and they needed from their library. At this point, now that we're doing another survey, I think what will happen is we'll find out if that's still the case. So once we get the results in, if space needs becomes one of the #1 priorities that we hear over and over in all the results, then that will kick us into action to say, I mean, being in the building, we all know it has problems that need to be fixed. Has that changed since COVID? Will that change that? You know, one of the issues, it's an aging building. It was originally built in the old side was 65, that the town hall side, the library side was 66, renovated in 2000. It was renovated, but it's still the original building. We still have some issues with particular structural issues, particularly wiring issues. There's things that after 50 years, the building is going to need some help. So we know it's coming. We don't know what form it's going to take. I think this next survey will either solidify that everything we heard 5 years ago is the same. Are the voices louder? Is the need more pressing? I think that remains to be seen. But my guess is, after having been in that building myself for over 20 years and talking to patrons, I think we're going to hear more of the same. And this is just a problem we pushed off to another day.
Julie, what we'll try to do is address some of the inadequacies piecemeal as we go along based on what funding is available through capital. And if and when a large amount of funding is available for a renovation project, that's to be determined. It would be in the future. So we're going to go along as well as we can and try to fix things as we obtain the funds through capital.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from members of the AdCom? I'm not seeing any hands raised. Any member of the public that has a question or comment?
Bob, it's me again. I will, Lucy Hancock, 15 Amber Road. Sorry, I didn't say that earlier. I will say, just put a plug in for the library's annual fund. It's still open and accepting donations, so pass the word.
Libby, would you pass the hat? Any other member of the public that has a comment? Not seeing any. Do you have a recommendation, Andy?
I do. I recommend a budget for fiscal 22 for the library of salaries in the amount of $1,559,866. Expenses in the amount of $369,200 for a total budget of $1,929,066. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Linda, Lucy, David. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for hearing us tonight.
All right.
Thanks, Bob, and everyone else.
Yeah. That brings us to our next agenda item, which is review of open meeting law requirements. And George had asked me to put this on the agenda, and I think primarily out of a concern for what AdCom subcommittees or AdCom meeting groups should be doing in terms of postings and minutes and compliance with the open meeting law. So I took a look at the open meeting guide this afternoon, and I'll give you my impressions. I don't think these are necessarily carved in stone. I'd especially welcome Victor's comments and those of anyone else that wants to weigh in on it. But I think to the extent that we have established AdCom subcommittees, and we have those basically for many of the items on the liaison charts, that if a quorum of that subcommittee is meeting either in person or virtually and is going to engage in deliberations, which in my mind is kind of like offering an opinion or a viewpoint or suggestion, raising questions about an issue, and there is a posting requirement and a need for minutes to be posted under the agenda for which the meeting was held. Now, we have had informal groups of the AdCom in the past. For example, I think I've served on, I guess only one, maybe financial policy review group. And I don't believe we posted for any meeting. We weren't really recognized as a formal subcommittee. We exchanged views, and I think ultimately those views were expressed in public before the full AdCom and voted upon. And this year, for example, when we came up with the AdCom bylaw proposal, I shared really on an informal basis with Victor and Dave Aline and probably Andy, drafts and requested comments. We didn't really have any formal meetings. There was never really a quorum together, and there were no postings or minutes. And ultimately, again, the product of that working group, if you will, was put before the full AdCom for public scrutiny and for a vote. I think, certainly when we've had the water subcommittee last year, we were exceedingly careful about posting agendas and creating minutes so that there'd be no question of compliance with the open meeting law. I know ACES regularly posts its subcommittee meetings and provides minutes. I think, probably the gray area is when you have a working group or a small subset of the AdCom that is sharing ideas about a specific project, like the financial policy or like the rules and policies review that's going on now. I guess I might even have to ask town council, does such a group have to post an agenda and do minutes? I don't know, Victor, if you have additional comments you may want to offer or anyone
I don't
else?
really have additional comments. I think, town council's guidance is always welcome. The practice seems to have gotten more formal over the years, and in part that may be as a result of interpretations from the Attorney General's office or even court cases. I agree with you that when there's a formal subcommittee that is meeting, it is subject to the open meeting law. I also agree with you that, if you're just, to take your example, when you were drafting the changes to the AdCom bylaw and you consulted with several members, not a quorum of the committee, that I don't think was a meeting. It was not a formal group. You were talking to a non-quorum. So it is a gray area where, you have working groups. Is that an informal group? Some people get together. On warrant articles, sometimes you'll have one person assign the article, but then we'll consult with somebody else or maybe two other people. That's not a committee. The liaison is still that initial person that person's just getting ideas from others, again, a non-quorum. So the other thing I think it's to consider when groups like, planning or CPC groups meet, I don't mean to say meet, when they attend the meeting of the planning board or the meeting of the community preservation committee, I don't really consider that to be a meeting of the subcommittee. They're all there to hear. They're not there to participate and give their ideas and debate amongst themselves.
They're not deliberating.
They're not deliberating.
Right. Is that, I hope that gives Nancy, did you have a question?
So Bob, would that hold? Because I knew that came up a couple times during the budget cycle. Is since it when we're going and talking to the various departments and getting information about their budgets, we're not deliberating. So in fact, do we need to post those meetings?
Well, if the entire public safety group of the AdCom or subcommittee of the AdCom is getting together with the police chief and is, excuse my phone. And I think if you're asking questions about, budgets, and you might want to consider doing that. You might want to consider whether it makes sense for everybody to meet with, a police chief or a fire chief, as opposed to just having the chair delegate that to one or possibly two people, and then having those people present the budgets as we do to the full AdCom. I think it's a gray area again, and I tend to agree with what Victor just said. Though, if you're not deliberating, deliberations are a necessary part of being subject to the open meeting law. And I do think a deliberation is the expression of an opinion or a viewpoint or discussion of alternatives, perhaps. That sort of thing. Libby.
I was just going to say kind of what Nancy was saying, that, I mean, if we're just kind of information gathering, and again, we're not deliberating when we meet with individual departments on their budget, we're getting information so that we can present it to the full committee, and we're not a quorum of AdCom, but I don't know if you're getting into the nuance of if it's a quorum of the liaisons for that particular department, but I think the default position is it's information gathering and there's no real deliberations that are happening. So that's sort of my thought, while the liaison meetings on budgets is less formal, if you will, than some of the other subcommittees we've had on larger topics. And I agree, I see ACES because, that's something where, for all Dave and the ACE team knows, they could have a quorum of AdCom at some of those meetings. So it's sort of a good default position that they post it. So that's just my thought.
Well, if there is a subcommittee, I do think some of our groups on the various budgets probably could be regarded as subcommittees. A subcommittee is explicitly subject to the open meeting law. It is, if the police chief sends everybody on the public safety subcommittee a piece of information, that does not implicate the open meeting law. But if somebody hits reply all about that piece of information and offers a viewpoint, it's a violation.
Bob, so would you define, like, I'm just going to use for an example, and this is probably 180-degree opposite example from the DPW or ACES, South Shore Country Club. Alan and I met with Kevin this week to discuss his budget. So we're two of the three liaisons to South Shore Country Club. But are the three, so is that considered a subcommittee? It didn't seem to me that it was, but I guess I'm going to defer to the lawyers on the committee to tell me what the answer is.
I guess I'm going to ask Coughlin.
Okay.
Because, as I said earlier, I think that's a real gray area.
Is this one of those, how many lawyers does it take to answer the question?
It could be.
Okay.
For example, to circulate a schedule, something like my sending everybody an agenda, or when I send on the Moody's bond rating from 2009 that Mary Powers sent earlier this week. That is perfectly appropriate. You don't need to post it or do anything like that. That's simply distributing information that could be later used at a meeting or not. But again, the open meeting guide is clear that if somebody were to respond to such an email, hitting reply all and saying, well, I think we ought to get rid of Moody's. They don't know what they're talking about. I think that, at least according to the state would be a violation of open meeting. Yes, David.
So I was going to say, I have a couple of things, but following up on that, you also can't reply individually to everyone.
Right.
Which just makes the circular.
Right.
But I was going to say,
Material violation.
right, on the subcommittee issue, I attended one of these sessions that the Attorney General did. It's now been 3 or 4 years. It was before I was on the advisory committee. And it was clear if you were an officially recognized subcommittee of a larger group and you were meeting and discussing whatever the business was of that subcommittee, that was subject to the open meeting law. So, but that is the sort of formal. So I think like for the Public Safety Committee, we've always met as a group on the budget with each of the public safety persons, and those have always been posted. So, but it is an official subcommittee in that context. My question that I wanted to raise is our policies and procedures group, which is not, I look at it as a subgroup of AdCom that's looking at something to present to AdCom. It's 3 members, so it's not a quorum. And so my question was, when we meet to talk about this, are we subject to the open meeting law? My sense is we're not, because it's not an official subcommittee in that context, but I want to before we do that.
That's my sense as well.
Because ultimately it's something that's going to come back to the whole committee and we're not a majority of the committee.
Has the public safety group posted its meetings with the police chief?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll see if I can get some further guidance from John Coughlin and maybe to pose some specific questions to him. George, does that address the issues that you kind of wanted to see addressed? It's as clear as mud, right?
It's as clear as mud. Yeah.
You live in gray.
I think the issues that have been brought up are kind of the ones in the back of my mind here. I don't know legally, I'm sure there's a definition for deliberations, but to David's point, when we're meeting as a group of liaisons and there's a quorum within that group, so there are 3 out of 4, and we're discussing a budget with the department head, and we're raising questions and having what I would call deliberations, but maybe from a legal standpoint, that's not a deliberation. I don't know. It just seems a little murky to me.
It sounds to me like the prudent course would be to post the meeting and do some minutes. And it sounds like that's what the public safety group has been doing.
I guess for me, what I'm learning here that I didn't know is, I guess it never occurred to me that the group of individuals assigned to a budget was a subcommittee. I don't know why I never made that connection, but I never connected us as a subcommittee. It was more a group of people. And in my experience in the 3 years, we don't deliberate amongst each other. We kind of you chunk it up and you're responsible for whatever. And the only reason that you're meeting together is for the convenience of the department head.
Well, certainly if you're just scheduling stuff, that is not within the scope. That's not subject to an open meeting.
But so I guess I'm sorry, I was half paying attention because we went from the dry to the more dry. But you got my attention with, we have named subcommittees. So if you have a liaison group that is working to understand the mechanics of a budget, but it's not a named subcommittee, are we thinking that that needs to be a posted meeting? I mean, could we make this any more complicated?
Well, I mean, we post all our liaison and budget assignments on our webpage. And every cell has a chair designated. And I think if that chair decides to call a deliberative meeting and there's a quorum present, that arguably it is subject to the open meeting law and needs a posted agenda and minutes. Yes, Julie.
But if your committee is meeting, like Nancy's saying, collectively with a department head, and you're just asking for information straight from the department head, but you're not deliberating among yourselves with the other AdCom members. You know, it's one thing ACES, you know, works on the school budget and there's deliberation. That's one thing. But if you're just asking a department head for information about why their budget went up or down, it's not like the liaisons are not talking amongst themselves about that, though. They're just taking the information down and reporting back. So I'm confused.
Sounds to me like it's for legal counsel and above our pay grade.
I'll see if I can get some better guidance from John Coughlin. And we'll communicate back with everyone. I mean, there is a good open meeting guide that is on the state's website. That I would urge anybody that, you know, has a question about something to go ahead and consult it. I mean, we try to be pretty careful about posting and agendas. Yes, Brenda.
But the thing that's not clear is whether assignment as a liaison makes you a subcommittee. That's the piece that I think would belong within AdCom's regulations. And I will admit, I read through them, but I don't remember anything about that one way or the other. So is our liaison collections subcommittee?
I'll get clarification from John Coughlin on that.
Yeah, the background of that, Bob, leads a little bit down a rabbit hole, because the purpose of assigning a liaison is to present to the AdCom with the department head a budget. And in order to prepare for that presentation, the liaison meets with the department head and asks questions in anticipation of what the AdCom might ask. So I just have a hard time seeing that as any kind of deliberation. It clearly is informational meeting to prepare for a presentation to a committee, i.e. AdCom. But I would
well, if it's just a one-on-one liaison with department head, the open meeting law is not implicated.
No, I'm suggesting if it's more that if there's let's say 3 liaisons and 2 of them meet with the department head, I still don't, wholly apart from whether it constitutes a subcommittee, I just don't see that within
I feel like that's the question I have to get answered from John Coughlin, because I don't feel like I can state any kind of black letter rule.
And I just sort of giving my view as to the background as to, you know, how one could end up chasing his tail on this stuff, which of course defeats the whole purpose. Not defeats the whole purpose, but it clearly is not the purpose of the open meeting law.
Do you want to say something, Evan?
No. So we can get the answer and then move on from this tonight?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we won't get the answer tonight, but we'll move
Well,
on.
I feel like we're rabbit holing with the whole concept.
And I know you want to get on to approval of the minutes of January 19th. So unless there's anything else.
They were very, very good minutes.
Unless we're on anything else on the open meeting law, I think our next agenda item is approval of minutes from meeting January 19th. Has everybody had a chance to look them over?
Bob, I have I have a couple of additional late-breaking changes that are not in the red line version that you all have.
And they are not from me. Just want to go on record.
I'm guilty.
The submitter shall remain nameless. But on page 4, under the town accountant, we've added the increase, specific amount of increase in salaries and for this year's budget versus last year. And that's for the salaries and for the total. And on page 2, it looks like under IT, there was a slight correction to the amount of the increase for salaries. And on pages 7 and 8, under liaison reports for CPC, we have some additional language relative to the Laner property and the Benjamin Lincoln house, which is an explanation of why the additional funds were added for debt payments there. And also under the Climate Control Committee, there's a name change to Climate Action Plan Task Force from Climate Action Committee. That was my bad. And then under subletter A, there's a little bit of extra language there regarding the development of a plan and funds requested. So those were the only additional changes.
Were you going to add budget books to the documents used?
Did I not add that? Yes, I did.
Okay,
So
good.
list of documents submitted, we've added budget books for AdCom members to use in reviewing departmental budgets.
All right, any further discussion? If not, I'd accept a motion to approve the minutes as revised as described by George.
I'll move to accept the minutes as revised by George. That is the minutes for the January 19 meeting of AdCom.
Is there a second? Thank you.
Second.
And a roll call vote. George?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Victor?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
Brenda?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Eveline?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And welcome back, Sue. I think that's 14-0.
I'm trying to talk to the governor about that.
Sue, where'd you go? Do you got to take Snickers for a walk?
No, I had to go to I had to run to the selectman's office meeting. I had to do my fund balance memo
Oh my gosh, fun times.
and a couple of articles, so.
Did they come up with any new and interesting questions that we never thought of? Just kidding.
So the warrant articles update, I circulated this afternoon a list of draft assignments for each of the warrant articles. I think there are 32 of them. We're down 6 from the 38 we had at last annual town meeting. If anybody feels uncomfortable with their assignment or would like to see things go in a different direction, let me know. It has been our practice to assign to our newest members the so-called perennials. So I would refer those people that have the perennial articles to take a look at the warrants for perhaps the last couple of years. And I think you will find a ready-made comment drafted. A word to whoever's reviewing the acceptance of committee reports. It's important to see whether any of those committees have gone out of existence, in which case we generally offer thanks to them, but we can review that when we get to them. There's only one warrant article that and Julie and I got together this morning and kind of went over the draft assignments, and we thought what we came up with made sense. The only one I haven't made an assignment on is the citizens petition on reading the names of volunteers at town meeting. And that's because in our conversation last week with Tom Mayo, he was inquiring of John Coughlin as to whether that was an appropriate subject matter for a warrant article. The feeling being that it relates more to a custom or tradition of the town rather than any kind of legal requirement to read the names of anybody that's deceased. There are obviously huge pragmatic problems with the town keeping track for decades of all the volunteers that have worked for the town. So it could ultimately be an interesting issue to address. And I think that's what I wanted to say about the warrant articles. And of course, you've got the text of the actual article that was distributed as well, along with the alpha list.
You haven't distributed the list of assignments, Bob, have you?
I did. I took the I took the first index page of which article is which, and I put people's names beside the articles, and I sent that out this afternoon.
Did anybody get that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
You must have been on the beach, Andy.
Well, you know,
Don't worry, Andy, you only have 7 of them.
internet connection is intermittent down here, but
I'll be happy to send it to you again, Andy.
if you would, I have searched for it. Of course, I was waiting with bated breath to look at it, but yeah, if you would, that would be helpful. I don't.
Okay. Happy to do that. I'll do that after the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on warrant articles at this point? We'll start our hearings once the selectmen go through their hearings on these. We'll probably get through the perennials rather quickly and then spend more time with perhaps some of the more substantive ones. Okay. I didn't hear from anybody about liaison reports. I don't know if anyone has had a liaison report. Yes, Andy?
I would like to update my last report on the master plan committee. The master plan committee has changed its dates. It has its next scheduled meeting is February 24th. Currently, the consultants are reviewing all of the comments and edits and putting together a final draft, which the members will review on the 24th, and then have a public presentation to the planning board on the final draft on March 8th. And that's about it. There's anybody interested in more information, check out the Master Plan Committee's website on the town's the town's own website. That's all I have.
Anyone else with a liaison report? Okay. We get to housekeeping, and I think our next meeting is Thursday. We've added the public works budgets to that meeting, so that might run a little longer. We still do not have a forecast group meeting scheduled. I don't know if you have any up-to-the-minute news on that, Sue.
I do not. I know we are meeting tomorrow morning to do a prelim. I don't know if it's going to be Friday and or Monday for the forecast group.
Okay. And I expect that we will be meeting next Tuesday. I have not received any word yet on a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the school committee. That'll happen after the forecast group meeting. And I have not received any word yet on a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the CPC. So that's what I'm anticipating for meetings right now. I think we probably have a meeting though. It would be February 16th. That's a Tuesday. If we have to get one of those joint meetings done, perhaps we'll need a Thursday. But that's where we are. Yes, Andy.
Are we hearing on Thursday, in addition to Public Works, landfill and sewer?
Yes, that's part of DP. Yes, that's part of Public Works.
Okay.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Something to look forward to.
Hey, it's big stuff this year. Talk about getting slammed by COVID.
Right.
Hey, Bob.
A lot of people cleaning.
Yes, Dave.
Since we're talking schedule, let me just throw one piece of information out for people who are interested. Next Monday, February 8th, I think it's 7, is the school committee's public hearing on the budget. So everybody on ACES is aware of that, but for anybody on the general committee who'd like to hear that, I think this year, perhaps more than others, it will be energetic.
Probably understated.
Is that at 7?
Perhaps. I think so. It'll be posted. But historically they've been at 7. Yeah.
Are they going to have more than 100 access points?
I hope so.
Yeah, the last one they had limited to 100, and I thought people were going to, from what I heard later, people were going to march on school committee building.
So get there early, get your seats early, like Andy did at town meeting.
Hey, speaking of seats early, there was a meeting at 1 o'clock this afternoon, Dave, of the budget subcommittee. Were you aware of that?
I was not. I did not attend.
My wife saw it on Facebook and brought it to my attention, and I jumped on quickly and looked around and saw you weren't there, and Julie wasn't there, and George wasn't there, and who else was supposed to be there? But so I jumped off again. I didn't want to inhibit anything, but I was surprised. I had not heard anything about that.
Okay.
But
the school committee is pretty good about posting all those.
They are, yeah.
And I think our next item is the policies and procedures review. I think that group can just work along as you elect, and let me know when you're ready to come back to the AdCom and we'll talk about it.
Open meeting law.
The warrant article editing procedures, I sent out what Daveline had sent to everybody earlier before this meeting, a few days back. Julie will be sending out the AdCom style sheet. For our new members, we try to make sure that we have a uniform style throughout our comments. It's something that the AdCom has taken great pride in the past, so that certain things are spelled certain ways and, and bylaw is spelled a certain way. And you want to take a look at that so that when you are drafting a comment or reviewing a comment, that you make sure that the style manual is followed.
Bobby, I don't know if they're going to add, remember what Dave Lean brought up last year? I know this sounds silly at this time because we're trying to
Just the
wrap up.
extra space.
Double spaces versus single after a period. Is that on there?
Gaveline was beaten down, so it's 2 spaces and it's the Oxford comma.
Okay. Just
So-
checking.
I know when I'm not fighting.
So after the
Pick your
period,
battles, Dave Lean.
after the period, after every sentence in a comment, there are 2 spaces.
Yes. And Andy, that school committee's finance meeting was posted.
If
I
you
saw
screw
that.
it up, Daveline and I'll fix it for you.
Yeah, that's what your editors do. They count spaces.
Did you say we use the Oxford comma or we do not?
We do.
We do.
You get that, Evan?
Andy, I stopped paying attention 20 minutes ago.
Do you want me to just quickly say what the flow of the articles is, just to quickly say it so that people hear it?
In the same email that I sent out with the article assignments, I also indicated which ones Daveline would be editing and which ones Nancy would be editing.
Yeah, I think it's all in the email.
So if you are writing a comment and the comment has been voted on by the advisory committee, you then need to send your finalized comment onto the appropriate editor. And then I'll let Julie take it from there as to the rest of the flow.
Okay, so the proposed flow is that the liaison, when completed with the draft of the article, what they consider complete, they will send it to the editor assigned to their article, and they'll CC me. And then the editor, when she's done making edits, will send a copy of the article to Bob and also CC me and the liaison. Then Bob is going to sign off on the article and he's going to send it to me and CC the editor. And then I'm going to send it off to the Board of Selectmen's office. Any questions?
And that actually cuts out a couple of steps that we had last year. So for people who are new, it may not sound like that, but it.
I'm also adding a column to the WAS, which is warrant article status spreadsheet.
Summary.
Which is a spreadsheet that will track the articles, who's working on them, what date the AdCom had its hearing, but also the new article column is going to say where in the process that article is. So when I send out, the next version, each version will say where the article is, and it'll either be with Nancy or Daveline or who's in charge of it at that snapshot in time. So hopefully that will be helpful, or if someone had a question and wanted to call me and ask, where is this article in the process, then I can let them know.
And the WAS gets posted on our advisory committee page weekly. I think the last item I have on housekeeping is the public comments procedures. And this principally relates to what I have now included in the last 2 agendas as a note at the end of the agenda. I had originally put it right in the comments from the public section because I was copying from the school committee. And I think Victor wisely suggested that the procedure on public comment was overwhelming the agenda. And we didn't get a lot of activity from the public in any event. So I just wanted to get the feeling of the group. Does it make sense to put it at the end of the agenda as a note? Does it make sense for me to just make an oral statement at the beginning of the public comments, similar to what I did tonight about public comment procedure? What do people think?
I think it's a good idea to keep it as you did it, because there are people that aren't familiar with the process and open meeting law requirements and our limitations on wading into territory that's not on the agenda.
Okay, so we'll leave it as
I
a
agree
note.
I agree with Libby.
I think it's overkill, actually. I don't think there's been a problem with public comment in the past. There was someone who was very rude last week, but this note wouldn't have affected that one way or the other.
She was just rude.
She was rude. I think the statement that, what the responsibilities of the committee are, and then the suggestion that the comments have to be limited to that, actually would have prevented comments 2 years ago, I guess, in the fall when we had a lot of people commenting on water, because at that point there was no warrant article or budget item on it. Similarly, last year, there were some comments before budget season on senior center. They may or may not have fallen under this, statement. So I think, and I also, I know the school committee does this, and this might be something you'd want to check with town council, but my understanding is that while you can limit comments to the 3 minutes or whatever other time you pick, that if there are more than 5 people who want to speak, you can't limit it to 15 minutes. So I just think it hasn't been a problem, and we don't really need to have the formal statement.
I mean, I could leave it, I can eliminate, I think the comment has to be on something that's within the jurisdiction of the advisory committee. I mean, I don't have to define what that is, but, if somebody wants to go off on, we need a resolution to stop war or, something else that, we've got nothing to do with. I don't know that that's, a comment that a chair of the AdCom should accept. Maybe the path of least resistance is going to take the least amount of time, but I mean, I'll take another look at it. I'm for the time being, I'm inclined to leave it in. I don't think it does any harm. I hear what you say about jurisdiction, Victor, and maybe I'll slim it down a little if I can.
And I would just say, Bob, that also with all these meetings being on Zoom, I think people are more likely to participate that didn't before. And so I think the method we're communicating in having our meetings opens the door to maybe newer, the public, more of the public coming. But I also think I think it's going to really pick up as we get closer to town meeting. With budgets, there's a lot of decisions to be made. And I feel like those 2 factors alone mean that, like you said, it's just a little bit of a belt and suspenders way to remind people of protocol.
Okay.
I think
Anyone
that's
else?
right. I think there's a lot of people that are really interested and vehement in some of that interest. And we're going to get, I think, more of that as we get into our own decision-making process around the budget. And so I think some, whether it could be edited down some is one thing, but I think we should be prepared to have to sort of speak to issues of how we proceed with people in the public wanting to make comments and not really knowing how town procedure works.
Remember also that we don't, other than on the hearings where we have to open it up to public comment, we don't have to take comment on agenda items that are not hearings. I mean, we traditionally do, but we don't have to.
Bob, can I just offer one thought?
Sure.
I would just echo Dave Lean's comments. I think that just if past is prologue, at least on the school committee side, there may be a fair number of folks who maybe for their first time are going to be interested in participating in a budget hearing around the school, and they may not be familiar with. And I guess my gut, even though I reserve the right to rescind this down the road, would be to err on the side of letting people speak and say their mind and give as best we can, the frameworks within which the comments are accepted. But I guess I'd be loath to stand on policy in the face of somebody who feels passionately enough about something to show up at a meeting. And I'm not suggesting you wouldn't, but I would throw that out there. I've seen a lot on the school committee. I think the school committee Carrie has wrestled with that this year, but I think by and large has erred on the side of letting people speak their mind. And I think that's been the right call from my vantage point.
I think I would probably err on the side of letting people speak as well. I'm not going to get Mike Puzo's stopwatch out and click it when somebody starts to speak. But at the same time, I don't think we want to encourage filibusters at the beginning of a meeting, especially when we've got an agenda to get through.
Yeah.
You also may want to, Bob, sort of look at this and distinguish. I mean, this is covering both the comments on the, in the open comment period at the beginning and comments on agenda items during the public hearing. So although it then sort of talks about it then talks about the 15 minutes at the start, it may not be entirely clear that this is applying to all comments, whether they're on matters with respect to agenda items or not. You may want to take a look at that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I know there's that general reference to where we will take comments in response to, other agenda items. And I think our last rules and policies review actually incorporated some of these time limits into our rules and policies. But let me take a look at it and we'll see what I come up with for my next agenda drafting experience. Anything else for this evening? Anything not anticipated within 48 hours? If not, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
George?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Dave? You're on mute.
Aye.
Victor?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
Brenda?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Eveline?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.